My name is Elena Brooks, and for 29 years, I've been the one who quietly fixed what everyone else broke. I live in Portland, Oregon, work as a financial consultant, and by all appearances, I have a balanced, ordinary life, except for the part where my family treats me like I'm invisible. For as long as I can remember, my mother has worshipped my older sister, Vanessa, as if she were some flawless creation molded by divine hands. Vanessa was tall, eloquent, a lawyer who commanded every room she entered. She was the golden child, the one who made our parents proud. And me, I was the quiet one, the one who calculated numbers and stayed out of the spotlight. But beneath that quiet surface, something inside me was breaking. It took me years to realize that silence isn't peace. It's suffocation disguised as duty. Every Friday, we had our family dinner. It was a ritual no one dared skip. Even when I had work deadlines or wanted one night alone, my mother would call repeatedly until I gave in. She would say things like, "This family has a seat for you. Elena, don't leave it empty." But that seat never really felt mine. It was just a place where I'd sit and endure their stories about Vanessa's promotions, Vanessa's house, Vanessa's latest charity speech. My father's laughter would fill the room as he lifted his glass. "She's always made us proud," he'd say, his eyes glowing with pride. And my mother would nod in agreement, her gaze sliding past me as if I were a guest in my own family. That night began like all others. The table was set, the wine poured, and Vanessa, glowing in her designer dress, talked about the new townhouse she had bought near the river. My parents listened as though she were announcing a royal coronation. I sat there, pushing food around my plate, wondering how long I could hold my composure. The words that had haunted me since childhood, "Why can't you be more like your sister?" lingered unspoken in the air. But then my mother turned to me, her tone sharp, her eyes narrow. "Elena," she said, "you're not even half the woman your sister is." For a moment, my chest went tight. I felt that familiar sting, the one that used to make me cry when I was a teenager. But I didn't cry this time. I just stared back and said quietly, "Then let her pay the mortgage for you." The clatter of forks and the echo of my own voice filled the room. My father's face drained of color. "Mortgage," he stammered. "What mortgage?" And just like that, the secret I had carried for 3 years shattered open before them all. I told them the truth, that ever since the pandemic, I had been transferring money every month to cover their house payments. It started the night my mother called, sobbing that they were about to lose their home after my father's business collapsed. I still remember sitting in my tiny apartment, staring at the wall, whispering to myself, "Just this once. I'll help them just this once." But once turned into 3 years and more than $70,000. I gave up trips, graduate school, and the down payment for my own home, all so they could stay afloat. When I said it out loud, the silence at the table was suffocating. Vanessa's smile froze midair, and my mother blinked as if I'd spoken a foreign language. Then came the denial. "We never asked you to do that," she said, her voice trembling. "You chose to help. Don't bring it up now." My father leaned back, his voice cold and authoritative. "It's inappropriate to discuss money at the dinner table." I laughed, a dry, bitter sound that didn't feel like mine. "Inappropriate," I said. 3 years of paying your mortgage is inappropriate to mention. But comparing me to Vanessa every week isn't." My words cut through the air like glass shattering. And for the first time, my parents looked small. But even then, they couldn't meet my eyes. Vanessa stared at her plate, silent, as if the truth had nothing to do with her. The rest of the night blurred. I left before dessert, my heart heavy, my body trembling from the weight of finally speaking out. When I got home, I opened my laptop, logged into my bank account, and stared at the line of automatic transfers. Month after month, the numbers glared back like silent witnesses. My hand hovered over the mouse for a long moment before I clicked cancel. A message appeared. "Are you sure you want to stop this payment?" I pressed yes. The first wave that hit me was pain, as if I'd cut off a piece of myself. But underneath that pain, there was something new, relief. For the first time in years, I wasn't bound by guilt or expectation. I poured myself a glass of water, sat by the window, and whispered to the empty room, "No more." That night, I barely slept. The apartment felt both too quiet and too loud at once. The hum of the fridge, the ticking of the clock, the echo of my mother's words looping endlessly in my mind. "You're not even half the woman your sister is." Those words had always found a way to live under my skin, but now they hit differently. This time, they didn't break me. They simply exposed how hollow their love had been. By morning, I was determined to reclaim what was mine, not money, but dignity. I spread every printed bank statement across my small dining table. The numbers stared back at me. $500, $1,000, $1,200, sometimes even $2,000 when my parents said, "Just this once, we're short again." I traced my finger over the total. $72,000. It should have been the foundation of my future. But instead, it was the silent tax I paid to remain a good daughter. My breath trembled. But this time, it wasn't from weakness. It was from clarity. I decided to stop living as if I owed them my existence. No more quiet sacrifices. No more proving my worth through financial rescue missions. That day, I started small. I signed up for a Saturday cooking class at a local community center. Something I'd always wanted to do, but had put off because I couldn't afford to. I could almost hear my mother's scoff in my head. "You don't need hobbies. You need stability." But as I stood in that bright kitchen surrounded by strangers laughing over burnt bread and spilled sauce, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: lightness. No one there knew me as the sister who wasn't enough. No one compared me to Vanessa. They only saw me as Elena, the woman clumsily learning to make pasta from scratch. When I walked home that evening, the sky was painted pink and orange, and for the first time, I caught myself smiling without forcing it. Weeks passed, and, little by little, I began to rebuild my identity. I reconnected with old friends, took weekend hikes near Mount Hood, and allowed myself to say yes to things that once felt selfish. My confidence grew quietly, like grass pushing through concrete. Even at work, something shifted. My manager noticed my renewed energy and offered me a chance to lead a financial review for one of our largest clients. I spent nights refining the report, double-checking every figure, every projection. When the presentation day arrived, I stood before the boardroom full of executives, my voice steady, my logic sharp. When it ended, the director looked at me and said, "Excellent work, Elena. You've got real leadership in you." Those words, so simple, so genuine, were worth more than any hollow compliment I'd ever chased at home. Recognition rooted in truth, not obligation. That evening, I walked out of the office with my head high, the city lights reflecting in my eyes like stars finally aligning for me. A month later, I received an email that made my heart race. A fintech startup in Seattle had found my portfolio online. They wanted to offer me a position as director of financial analysis. The salary was 40% higher, with stock options and full relocation support. For years, I'd dreamed of a life beyond Portland, but I'd always stayed close, afraid my parents would fall apart without me. Now, I realized that fear had been their leash. I sat at my desk for a long time, rereading the offer. Then I whispered aloud, "It's time." I hit reply, typed 4 words, "I accept the offer," and pressed send. In that instant, it felt as if 1,000 invisible chains had fallen away. The following weeks were a blur of packing boxes, farewell dinners, and long walks through the city that had shaped both my wounds and my resilience. I revisited the quiet park where I used to sit after family dinners, staring at my phone, waiting for an apology that never came. This time, I looked up at the trees and said softly, "You don't owe them peace anymore." When moving day arrived, I took one last look around my empty apartment. The walls that had once heard my silent sobs now stood witness to something new: freedom. I loaded my car, started the engine, and began the 5-hour drive north. As I crossed the state line into Washington, I rolled down the windows and let the wind whip through my hair. It was more than a drive. It was a crossing, a boundary between who I used to be and who I was becoming. Somewhere along that highway, I realized something profound. I didn't need anyone to validate my worth. I had built it myself, transaction by transaction, sacrifice by sacrifice, and now, rebirth by choice. Seattle greeted me with a crisp wind and a sense of renewal I hadn't felt in years. My new apartment was small but bright, floor-to-ceiling windows framing the skyline, the Space Needle gleaming like a promise in the distance. When I turned the key that first morning, I stood in the doorway for a long moment, breathing in the quiet. No family photos on the walls, no echoes of criticism in the air. Just me, a woman starting over from nothing but her own strength. I unpacked slowly, savoring each box as if I were unwrapping a version of myself that had been hidden away too long. The new job was intense, fast-paced, demanding in ways that forced me to rise higher. But it was also fair. My colleagues valued skill, not family legacy. When I spoke in meetings, people listened. When I proposed financial strategies, they debated my ideas with respect, not condescension. For the first time, I wasn't overshadowed. I was seen. That simple truth filled me with a quiet power that no applause at a family dinner had ever given me. 3 months passed before the past found its way back. It came in the form of a text from my old neighbor in Portland, Mrs. Jensen. Her message read, "Elena dear, just walked by your parents' place. There's a big banner hanging outside. You might want to see this." A second later, a photo arrived, across the front porch of my parents' house, in bold red letters. The banner read, "Congratulations, Vanessa, for saving the family home." I stared at the screen, my stomach tightening. The house that had nearly fallen into foreclosure, the one I had spent 3 years paying for, was now being paraded as Vanessa's triumph. I should have expected it. My hands trembled as I set the phone down. For a moment, I thought about calling my mother, demanding an explanation, but then I stopped. I didn't want excuses. I wanted truth, and truth was something my family had never known how to handle. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at my kitchen table, surrounded by the hum of the city, and opened the folder I had carried with me from Portland. Every bank statement, every transfer receipt, every message my mother had sent saying, "Just this once." I laid them out in order, tracing the timeline of every sacrifice I'd made. The total stared back at me again. $72,000. Proof of everything I'd endured and everything they'd erased. I could have walked away. I had my new life, my freedom, my apartment, and a career that was finally blooming. But something inside me burned. It wasn't revenge. It was reclamation. I couldn't let them rewrite my story while I sat in silence. Not again. So I began compiling everything. Like the financial analyst I was trained to be, I created a spreadsheet mapping out each month's payment, added notes with the dates of my mother's pleas, attached screenshots of every text. I even designed a bar chart, one that showed how just this once had become 36 times. As I built the report, I realized this wasn't just data. It was my voice in numbers. It was my truth, finally given form. When I finished, I saved the file and sat back. Outside, the Seattle skyline shimmered, indifferent and alive. I whispered to the reflection in the window, "If the truth embarrasses them, that's not my fault." 2 days later, my cousin, Sarah, called from Portland. Her voice was hesitant. "Elena, your parents are hosting a big celebration next week. They're calling it a family appreciation dinner. They asked me to put together a slideshow for it, mostly pictures of the house and Vanessa standing in front of it." She paused, lowering her voice. "They're saying she saved the home." "I thought you should know." I thanked her quietly, then asked, "Can you send me the slideshow file?" When I opened it later that night, I felt both fury and clarity wash over me. The final slide read in bold gold letters, "Thank you, Vanessa, for preserving our family home." I didn't delete their slideshow, I simply added to it. After Vanessa's final photo, I inserted new slides, each one revealing the truth. Screenshots of the transfers, the bar chart of the payments, the messages begging for help, and at the very end, a photo of the house with a single line beneath it. This was my contribution. Don't forget it. When I previewed the finished slideshow, my hands were trembling, but my voice in the room was calm. I knew exactly what I was going to do. The night of their celebration would not be a spectacle for their lies. It would be the unveiling of the truth they had buried. The night of the dinner arrived with an almost cinematic stillness. The restaurant gleamed with chandeliers and laughter. My father stood proudly at the head of the table, microphone in hand. "Tonight," he said, "we honor our daughter Vanessa for her strength and for preserving our family home." Applause, cheers, pride, my name never spoken. When the slideshow began, I rose from my seat. "There's one more version," I said, walking forward. My father frowned. "Elena, too late." The screen flickered. Financial contributions 2020-2023. The room went silent as numbers began to appear. Every transfer, every message. My parents froze. Vanessa paled. My mother's lips trembled. The final slide read, "Without my help, this home would have been gone." I faced them. "If the truth embarrasses you, that's not my fault." Whispers, gasps, then slow applause. Steady, growing. I looked at my father, whose hand shook around the microphone, and at my mother, whose eyes filled with tears. Vanessa's shoulders sagged. I said softly, 3 years. $72,000. I did it quietly, but not anymore. I turned and left as the room fell into stunned silence. Outside, the Seattle night wrapped around me like freedom. The weight of 3 years lifted. For the first time, I felt whole. 2 days later, my parents knocked on my door. My mother's voice broke. "We're sorry, Elena. We'll add your name to the deed." I smiled faintly. "I don't need my name on that house," I said. "I have a home now. Mine." My father's voice was hoarse. "You deserve better." "I already have it," I said quietly. "Respect, peace, my own life." They left with tears in their eyes. I poured myself a glass of wine and stood by the window, the Space Needle glowing in the distance. The city stretched before me, endless and alive. For years, I thought vengeance meant exposing the people who hurt me, but now I understood. It meant reclaiming the parts of me they had tried to erase. I whispered to the night, "This is what freedom feels like." Thank you for listening to Elena's story. If her journey resonated with you, remember to like, share, and subscribe to Vengeance Within, where every story reveals the strength that rises from pain.